All right, guys, it's Apurva. I've got another episode of Door Stories podcast today. Super excited to have our new guest that we got, David Little.
Yep.
Now a growing friend of mine who we met at a mastermind, just talking shop and talking about each other's journeys, and we quickly found some synergy in what we do. David is going to unpack his whole story, but is private lender, hard money lender, mostly in the Texas Metro. And so we both kind of similarly play in that space. So we just said, hey, let's talk about our journeys, and couldn't be more excited to have you today. David, welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome to the show. So David, let's just start. I always kind of start with the background. Just give me your professional journey, where you started, kind of just out of college and what you've been doing.
Yeah, perfect. So my background is in petroleum engineering. I went to A&M for my undergraduate and master's there, and then actually started with an oil and gas company. Their headquarters here in the Houston area, but they have small division offices all throughout the United States. So I started with them in 2010, and as I started with that engineering journey, I always had a passion for real estate. So on the side, I was always doing different real estate ventures as well. So I started with just going out purchasing single-family rentals.
Yep.
Started growing a portfolio there, and then got interested in the Airbnb space, did a raw land development deal, participated as a passive investor in my first hard money loan in about 2015. And so I was always kind of doing different things in real estate, and then ultimately that ended up culminating to me and my now business partner starting Crown Capital Resources in 2017. The story there goes is we're both engineers, similar backgrounds. He ended up contacting me and saying, hey, do you want to go and flip a house together? We had done different things in real estate. We'd never flipped a house. I thought that might be fun. And we went out for months trying to actually acquire the house. So we were going to wholesalers and doing, you've done the whole process where you run through the house in 10 minutes and you flip cards. And months and months we just couldn't acquire the house, and we were leaving our engineering job at lunch, going and looking at houses, coming back and just striking out over and over again. And then a friend of ours reached out and said, hey, I actually acquired a house, but I don't have any money. Can you guys loan to me? And I told my business partner Jeremy, I said, I think I could scrounge up some of that old paperwork from when I was actually a passive investor, and we could do this. And so we did our first hard money loan in 2017. And we finished that one, 4 or 5 months later, and our impression was like, man, this was pretty easy, but more importantly this was very compatible with a 9-to-5 job as well.
Yeah.
Because we were very much in the headspace that real estate for us was just a side venture. Like we mentally we had said we just want to continue. We're going to continue in our engineering jobs throughout our careers. This will always be kind of nights and weekends work.
Got it.
Yeah, so that's how our first one started.
Wow. Okay, so I'm going to unpack a lot of that.
Yeah.
First things first, you mentioned that you kind of started dabbling in real estate yourself, right? What gave you exposure in the first place? Was it your own curiosity, or was any kind of professional kind of guidance that you got, or family or whatnot that kind of gave you exposure to it right out the gate?
I was always interested in it. I think that when you look at what your investment avenues are as a younger professional, when you don't have access to like a ton of capital, single family residential real estate allows you to leverage your capital, and you can actually go acquire properties with relatively lower amounts of capital. So as an example, when I first started buying rental properties in 2013, I was out buying $100,000, $120,000 homes in the DFW area. And these were nice homes, 2,000 square feet, brick construction, relatively new, 3.2s. And for those, I was putting down, roughly $25,000. So for me, that was a very easy entry point from monetary standard to say I can start acquiring this real estate.
Right.
So when I looked at it, I thought it was, from a tax advantage perspective, it was really great. From a leverage perspective, it was really great. And to me, I liked it being a little bit more active than saying, I'm just going to buy, an equities portfolio and let it ride.
Right, right.
I wanted to be more involved, and I wanted to learn about it.
And one thing that's kind of unique, and I'm sure you see this too, engineers, doctors, lawyers, most of them are high W-2 type earners, and they're always looking for kind of a way to stretch those dollars and those earnings. So it sounds like that's very synergistic to kind of what you ended up doing. So let's bring it forward a little bit. So you and Jeremy, your partner, collaborated on just a one-off loan opportunity that just kind of happened. So what was the next step? You guys obviously fell in love with the asset, right? Because like hard money lending is an asset itself, where the paper is the asset. And then what's the next? How did you find the next opportunity? Where did it start to grow? You ultimately, this is your full-time thing now.
It is now, yeah,
right? So there's a journey there. Let's unpack that.
Yeah. So we did our first hard money loan in 2017, and then for about the next, roughly 4 years, what we did was we each put in a few $100,000 and we just lent our own capital out.
Okay.
And so for us, it was a relatively passive way for us to grow our capital outside of our W-2. And over that 4-year period, we learned a lot. We made a lot of mistakes, but it was our own money for a long time. And then very similarly, I feel like as the story goes for most entrepreneurs, you have your immediate family that says, hey, could I start investing with you guys? And the answer was, yeah, sure. So we started bringing on family capital, roughly 2021. And then we started bringing on, friends capital, and then now kind of more fundraising outside of that. So if you were to visually look at the chart of our assets under management, if you will, it's basically a completely plateaued line where it was our own capital, and then 2021 it really started ramping up.
Nice.
Once we started bringing in outside investors, and we realized we had a little bit of a mental shift in saying, initially it was, this is just a great ROI for our own funds, but then what we realized is when you bring on third-party capital, you can really scale the net income of this business because you're able to earn origination fees on third-party capital, which is really powerful.
Yeah, that's incredible. So, I want to kind of dissect the business a little bit, because, you kind of started with your balance sheets, right? Your own personal money, grew, got some friends and family money, and now you've kind of evolved into, a mature real estate private equity company, right? Yep. And so, but did your partner have experience in this at all?
Yeah, interestingly enough, started with the company right around the same time, the engineering company. We actually had our own different real estate journeys. I went down the single family route. He was buying Airbnbs in the Galveston area, but we were individually very interested in real estate. And we worked in different divisions. Like I mentioned, the company has 8 different divisions that are constantly moving engineers from city to city to city. So when we got together in 2017, that was actually a time when the company had transferred us both to San Antonio. So we were both under the same office, and we were always friends over that period of time. So it was easy for us to get together and say, hey, you've been doing real estate in XYZ, I've been doing real estate in XYZ. Like, let's get together and see if this venture is going to work out. And don't get me wrong, we started thinking we're going to go flip houses together, and it ended up being completely different journey.
So you started with a different vision, and then kind of morphed into, once you got a taste of the kind of the lending side of it.
Exactly.
Partnerships are hard.
Yeah.
Right? They're like a marriage, right? And so tell me a little about how you guys kind of decided to divide up roles, talked about kind of like, splits, of course, just share where you're comfortable, but like in general, like it's not easy stuff, right? And it's constantly evolving as the business grows and changes, and even the vision, right? Like, where are we going with this, right? So walk me through kind of how you guys.
Yeah, I would say that bringing on and working with a partner can be one of the greatest gifts that you can have as an entrepreneur, but it can also be a curse when it's not done right.
Right.
And I would highly recommend for any young professional entrepreneur out there who's thinking about bringing on a business partner to be very, very, very intentional on the front end about what are your shared vision, what is my ultimate objective with this company. I think there are certain key pillars that you need to absolutely agree on, and if you don't, you probably shouldn't be in partnership with this person. And so there's actually a book that called The Partnership Charter that
I haven't heard of that one. That's a good one.
It's a fantastic book, and it's written by actually a consulting firm that deals with partnership dissolutions. And so what they do in the book is they actually walk through, they help partners read it together, and they walk through, hey, what are your shared visions? What do you do in scenario X, Y, and Z? And then you actually write out a partnership charter and append it to your operating agreement.
Oh, wow.
So highly would recommend that for anyone thinking about bringing on a partner. But yeah, so for me, it's been a huge blessing. You know, my business partner and I have extremely aligned vision on the business, on life, on faith, on family, and it's been a huge blessing because being an entrepreneur in whatever journey can be it can be really hard, and it can be very lonely as well, as you know.
Absolutely,
like,
yeah.
It is a lonely journey, and so that is kind of the biggest gift of having a business partner is for somebody to kind of be in that corner with you in that journey.
Oh, I love that. That's fantastic stuff. So, you know, I'm going to shift back to kind of more the tactical stuff with the business. Yeah. You guys self-originate currently.
We do.
You don't have a heavy-duty sales team or kind of a model to bring in business. You know, walk me through, you know, how easy is it for you guys to source business? I'm assuming you're underwriting it or your partner's underwriting it. You know, is there something you guys are looking for? You know, let's just talk to the investor, the would-be investors, the would-be borrowers in the audience. You know, for Crown Capital, what do you guys look for to place capital and partner with somebody on their flipping journey or real estate investing journey?
I would say, and I'll give you a little bit of a primer for anyone who might not be as familiar with hard money lending. One of the toughest things about our business, as you know, is the balance between incoming deal flow and then available capital.
Right.
Because you have to raise capital and raise your deal flow, raise deal flow, raise capital together. If you outrange on one, it can be kind of dangerous for the business.
That's right.
We have been very lucky, in my opinion, that we have always had really good deal flow.
That's great.
Even today, we grew from, as an example, I mentioned we started in 2007 and 2021, roughly, it was our own capital. We were still under 1 million AUM in 2021. And then from 2021 to last week, we've grown from 1 million to 20 million. We just broke 20.
Holy crap.
So huge.
That's awesome.
Huge.
Yeah.
And luckily for us, the biggest challenge that we've had over that period has been raising capital, third-party capital investors who come in and are making a yield. For us, we've always had really steady deal flow, and I think the reason that is because we operated for nearly 5 years at the front end of our business, growing those connections and building those bridges initially. So when we decided to really ramp up, we had a really strong network already. We weren't starting from zero, so that's been truly like a blessing for us.
On the investor side, like investors to you.
Well, I guess I would say our clients and borrowers. We've always had a strong.
On the investors, like real estate investor side.
Yeah, real estate investors.
Got it.
Yeah. So, and just for clarity on some of the verbiage that we use, like clients and borrowers would be the real estate investors who bring you the deal flow, and then what we call investors would be third-party capital.
People that are parking their money with you. Got it. Very good. And AUM, for those that it's assets under management. So that's kind of the size of the portfolio you guys have continued to grow.
Exactly. Yeah. Total notes you have outstanding.
So let's kind of talk about the goal. I mean, you guys have grown very fast, and honestly, the past 2 years have been very challenging times, right, in real estate.
Yeah,
but you've continued to grow, which is a huge testament to y'all's ability to, kind of execute. But let's talk about where are we going with it.
Yeah. Well, I think we did make a strategic shift. So I left my W-2 job 6 months ago to pursue.
Congratulations.
Crown Capital. Thank you. Crown Capital full.
Never going back, right?
No, certainly not. And so I'm full-time in the business and have been for 6 months. The first big change that we made, which was really material, is we changed from the participation model to a fund model.
Okay.
And
walk me through that
question in a second.
Okay.
So the participation model agreement would basically be, hey, we are originating XYZ Drive, and we need $300,000 to fund this project.
Okay.
Right? We would call on our investor base and say, hey, does anyone want a piece of this deal? So people would email us back and say, I want 100,000, I want 50,000, and then we would take the business funds and carry the other, 50 to 100,000.
Got it.
So we would kind of hodgepodge this deal together. We would send out participation agreements, and then we would fund it.
Got it. So kind of one by one.
Yeah, it was one.
Okay.
Yeah, one by
kind of
one.
like a syndication model for real estate investors.
That's the best way to describe it. Yes.
Got it. Okay.
Now, when I went full time, me and my business partner decided we needed to think through what was the next step in the business. How do we legitimize the business? And so what we did was we actually hired on a law firm. We created a 506c fund, which
Yep.
is a fund under the SEC. And so now we essentially have a large fund of money that investors are getting paid on, and then we're able to originate out of that fund. So it's a lot more seamless from an operational perspective.
And the fund, just to clarify for the audience, really, there's different types of funds you can make.
That's correct, yeah.
Right. So you said the 506c.
Yes.
So that one allows you to go out and solicit. Is that correct?
That's exactly right, yeah. So you can openly solicit. So if down the road we were looking for third-party capital investors and we wanted to place an ad on Meta or on Google, we could do so.
Got it. However, there's a verification that you got to go through.
That's correct. So we as Crown Capital Resources are responsible for the accreditation verification.
Got it.
Which it does place a little bit more of a burden on us, but the 506B, which is the other type of fund model, it was a little bit, in my opinion, it had a little bit more of a gray area between how you can fundraise. You know, technically they need to be pre-existing relationships, and so, you know, my business partner and I joked when we moved this from the previous model to, you know, a fund under the SEC is like, well, the first rule is like, don't go to jail.
Right.
So
right.
we wanted to have exercise an abundance and caution on making sure we're compliant. And to be honest with you, the 506c just seemed to be less gray area with it. So that's
Makes
why we
sense.
chose to
Makes
go
sense.
with it.
Yeah, you're a little safer. You just have to do the third-party verification, and that's through a third party, so you get some protection layers there.
And that's exactly what we do.
Right.
We do a third party, so we don't hold the clients, the investors' information. But to answer your question, now that we have this new model set up, it really does allow us to springboard and to think through, like, well, how big could we get, right? And I wish I had a little bit more of a defined answer for you. I think, to me, it's like, do I think it's feasible that we go from 20 million to 40 million within the next calendar year? I think we'll get there.
Wow, that's incredible. Double.
Yeah,
Wow.
we're I think we will double within the next year. But if you were to say, is this going to be a $200 million fund? I'm not quite sure I want to get there, because within this, you know, the mentality of growing and wanting to earn more money and wanting to build the business and the brand, there's also another component of my personal life as well, you know?
Yeah.
Because the folly, again, to the new budding entrepreneurs out there is like, you're going to grow your business and you're going to be successful, but that's not what life is about either, right?
No, absolutely. There's
It's
a balance
about,
there.
like, having time with your family, having control over your own personal time, and having autonomy. And so I don't want to lose those things, and I don't want to sacrifice my family's time and priorities just for the sake of growing the business to some number that I'm
it'll be self-defeating kind of growth, right? So you know, and I found, and I'm maybe you've seen the same in our industry, and you know, hard money lenders in Texas, albeit Houston or San Antonio, it's a small circle, right? And I found, like, this is kind of just back industry stuff for the audience. It's like 50 to like 100 is like the sweet spot of like size.
Yeah.
Like you said, either once you kind of surpass that, you're like unlocking a whole new layer of, like, you know, scale and, you know, teams and all this stuff, right? Whereas, like, if you live within that 50 to 100, it seems to be like that's where everybody's comfortable. So you're on your way. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So walk me through, of the 20 so far, is that all equity, like partner equity?
Yeah. So.
Or do you have leverage?
We do have a little bit of leverage. Our leverage currently, we have a facility set up for $2.5 million.
Okay.
Currently.
Yep.
Of which we're only drawing approximately $700,000 of it today.
Got it.
So that is actually an important distinction about our fund, is we don't primarily raise through bank debt.
Got it.
We choose to use our revolving line of credits, the bank lines that we have, more as a way to smooth the imbalances between payoffs and origination. Because that can be a really big pain point for
Yeah. Just kind of the capital in and out flows. It's
and
tricky.
as an example for your listeners, in a perfect world, you have $500,000 of properties paying off on a Monday, and then $500,000 of properties originating on a Wednesday, right?
Yep.
Perfect. But what ends up happening, it seems like 8 times out of 10, is the properties that were supposed to pay off on a Monday have now been delayed a week.
Right.
So you now have a capital imbalance of $500,000 for like 4 days.
Yeah. So you're using some credit facilities, just borrow, bridge the gap replenish. That's fantastic. You know,
That's right.
I just
So
learned something today.
The name of the game for us is we use those bank lines as primarily capital efficiency, not fundraising.
Got it. No, and that makes sense, because I can imagine that's not cheap money either. It's just kind of getting you to the finish line. So you're only borrowing for like a small window.
That's correct.
That makes sense. Very, very responsible. So walk me through kind of the team size.
Yeah.
And y'all are lean and mean right now.
Yes, we are. So it's myself and Jeremy Adrian. He's the co-founder and business partner. And then we have a loan originator named Linda.
Okay.
So we just have 3 people under employment right now. We are bringing a 4th person on for second week of December.
Nice.
And she'll help initially in the the processing side, but later on maybe more of the operational side as well. So we're very, very lean.
And I mean, 20 million off three bodies is very impressive, right? And I think it seems like kind of your vision to scale, and also kind of giving yourself kind of a forced ceiling to say, hey, this is good enough, this is big enough. Yeah. You could continue to run a pretty lean operation.
Yeah, I mean, I think with bringing on our 4th employee, I think we could run a $40 million fund with 4 people.
Oh, that's awesome.
And the reason there is, I mean, keep in mind too, is Jeremy and myself were forced to be hyper efficient in this business because for the vast majority of the life of this company, this was a nights and weekends thing, right? And so for us, it was always, we needed to build in the processes in place, the automations in place, so that we needed to work as little as possible on Crown Capital resources because we were already exhausted from our engineering job.
That makes sense, yeah.
And so for me, I've been full-time for 6 months, and in those 6 months, we grew from 14 million to 20 million. And then my business partner, Jeremy, he just left his W-2 2 weeks ago.
Wow.
Yeah, so he's now full-time. But for the vast majority, I mean, for almost 7 years, we haven't had a full-time employee. So
that's awesome. So you're like need to kind of work within a very condensed set of hours. Yes. Created a very efficient business.
Yes, that's right.
That's awesome.
That's right.
That's really cool. And it's kind of very similar when we both have young kids.
Yeah.
When you have when you have these young kids, like your days and hours just become more and more constrained.
That's right.
And so you just have to be more efficient. You have no choice.
100%.
That's fantastic. All right, so tell me kind of some lessons you've learned just as an entrepreneur, right? Like you're 6 months into this, right? Although you've been moonlighting anyways, right? So your journey started a long time ago, but like officially like ripped off the cord. What have you learned along the way? What are some lessons that you would say like, wow, learn something new from shifting from W-2 to running on your own? Huge difference.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that.
So one of my biggest learnings is that when you jump full-time into a business, there is a never-ending to-do list when you own a business.
Right.
And if you want to, you can work 80, 100 plus hours a week every single week. It's absolutely possible. And so what I would tell young people jumping off is to really prioritize yourself, and if you have a family, it'd be yourself and your family, because the roles and responsibility of a business that you own will always be there.
Right.
It will always be there. And so what I think most young business owners will find is that if you really focus on, it's kind of Pareto's principle. It's you got to focus on the 20% most important things in your business,
right? Because
those will yield 80% of the actual output of your business.
That's right. Love that.
And so having that mentality on the front end is ultimately going to lead towards you having better relationships with your wife and your kids, because if you're singularly focused on the business, the reality is like you're not prioritizing them.
Right. Absolutely.
And so I think there's, people, when I listen to a lot of these podcasts, they just singularly give business advice and things like that. But I would say, be very mindful and guard your time.
I love that. I mean, I think that's why, immediately kind of hit it off right from our first kind of interactions, getting to know each other. Very similar principles, right? I'm not going to act like I'm perfect. I'm certainly kind of figuring my things out as we go, right? Sure. But in the sense of like reprioritizing and focusing on family and health and all those things are so important. Otherwise, blink of an eye, it's over. And the reality is it affects the business, right? If you're not all in and kind of like running at 100, both in headspace, physical, et cetera, the business suffers, right? And your team culture and all these things, right? And so those are lessons I've learned along the way. And I'm like, wait a minute, I got to kind of recalibrate my thinking here.
Yes.
So so entrepreneurial journey, you've kind of shifted, 24/7, right? There's no off switch, right? And it's there, but there's also no one to tell you what to do, right? Yeah. And that's like a new headspace for a lot of people. So those there's a lot of people in this audience that often listen that are wanting to make that shift, right? Yeah. Of like, hey, I've got, I have very great friends that are very successful in those 9-to-5s, right? But they're not used to like, wait a minute, like it's 7 to 10, right? And you got to pick and balance, like we're talking about, of like where you can allocate time. But tell me about kind of that change, right? Of like, hey, I've got a clear role every single day, right? But then I've got an off switch. Whereas, like you said, it's endless. Yeah. How do you kind of balance that in your head?
Well, let me pull on the thread of something you said previously, which has been a huge journey for me, and then I'll go back to your second question here. I've told people this before, like 10 years ago, right? So 27-year-old David. The number one thing I cared about was making as much money as possible.
Sure.
Right? And as I grew older and I really started thinking about what was important to me, ultimately what I came down to, and this is my answer, not everybody's answer, but right. For me, what I realized was that the only true scarce resource in life was actually time.
Right.
And so the most important thing to me then became, I just want personal autonomy over my own time.
Yeah.
And ultimately, one of the main shifts that happened there was I realized that my W-2, albeit a wonderful job, like by any other measure,
sure,
it was never going to give me that personal autonomy over my own time.
That's right, yeah.
And so when I had that realization, I said, well, man, I need to make this shift. Now, luckily, it was serendipitous because as I was having this mental shift into realizing this, the business was also growing pretty precipitously. So I was able to make that jump, and I still feel like I had a good safety net, right? The business had been operating positively for, in positive cash flow for 5+ years. It was an easy jump to make. But it was a personal shift, and I had to realize that it's not about money, it's about time, and how can I actually have that? It's never going to be working at W-2, it's going to be owning your own business.
Right.
Now, with that comes, when you move into your own business and you do have personal autonomy and control over your own time, you've got to be really, really careful because it can be a slippery slope, like what you're just saying. You can very easily fall into the headspace of like, well, the more I work, the better this business will grow, and the better. So, in reality, it's like balance as a business owner in the long term is really what's going to drive performance. You can't burn yourself out. You can't just think the number of hours I work is directly proportional to the execution of this business, because if you're overexerting yourself and if you're stressed out, the usually the right answer is I just got to hire somebody to do a lot of this.
Right.
Work,
yeah.
Right.
Delegate and elevate. Right.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So let me ask you this. More kind of so I think we've unpacked the mental decision making to make the shift, right? But I think a lot of people, especially in my own network, it's like, hey, like when's the right time to start your own thing? Is there enough? Because for most businesses, you guys were lucky because you kind of laid some groundwork, so it started to become cash flow positive. And this asset is a little bit easier, right? It's like put money out, earn money, done. Like it's kind of this like nice cyclical turning of capital, whereas not every business is like that, right? But like where was it where like, okay, you felt financially comfortable to like take the leap, right? Was it you got kind of this moonlighting thing to a certain threshold, y'all had created a nest egg for you, like what was it? Because like that's a hard thing for a lot of people to overcome.
It was my engineering background makes me just inherently more risk averse, and so when I jumped, it was to the point where Crown Capital was bringing me more money than my W-2 job.
That's great.
So
okay.
That's the easy answer, right?
Sure.
That's the reality. The harder answer is, and if you're young and you're thinking, I want to do something and I'm currently in a job which I don't love and I don't see myself working there over 30 years, the answer is you just need to start now. And so the easiest way to do that is you have to find a mentor And a lot of people think I'm going to go find a mentor and he's going to show me the ropes and then he'll bring me up on his hip and all that stuff. What you need to do is you need to seek somebody out, post on Facebook, post on some of these bigger pockets, any of these forums, and just say, I'm willing to do work for free, and I want to provide value to somebody, and in exchange, can you show me the process?
That's great.
Right? That would be my number one recommendation for somebody to look in to get into. So if you want to get into wholesaling,
right,
reach out to different forums and say, I'm willing to work for free. Can you show me how you do lead gen? I will work 10 hours a week for you, generating leads for you. And if you think I'm doing a good job, maybe show me the next step of the business.
That's great.
And even the hard money loan thing. I mean, we're sitting here at a $20 million portfolio today, but the reality is, like, we started with one.
Right.
And then 6 months later, we still had one. And then 6 months later, we had two. It started really
that's
slow.
a long journey.
It was, truly. It was a very long journey. But so many people are hamstrung because, and I understand it. Like, you listen to these podcasts and you hear people who, they're saying, I'm into this business for 10 years, I've been in this business for 20 years, and it seems so overwhelming.
Right. And
you just got to start.
And I think your risk aversion it was a 7-year journey to basically today, of which 6 months ago you finally flipped the switch.
Pull the trigger.
Right?
I know.
But you were running the business, right? It was just kind of organically growing and kind of, which, I think for a lot of people, that's a way more, although you're working really hard because you're kind of working 2 jobs basically, but a more safe way to get there. Or like you said, rip the Band-Aid off and go. It's kind of like, I parallel it to, like, people always think about, like, when is the right time to have kids?
Oh yeah.
Do it, right? Yeah. If your head's there, just do it, right? Because it just gets harder and harder as you get older, right? But no. So let's talk about kind of, you mentioned kind of doubling in growth in the next year, and then kind of figuring out kind of like a nice, comfortable place for it to run, right? I don't want to put answers in your voice, but basically, is it getting it to where it's optimized, to it kind of just runs on its own at that level, just like you said, kind of earning back time, because that's more important to you anyways and more valuable to all of us. But, like, is that kind of the end game here?
Yeah, I think within owning a business, and every business owner knows this, there are some things that you do in the business which you cherish doing, you enjoy, and then there are certain things that are just tedious tasks for you.
Right.
I'm still doing both right now. And so for me, it's not, I don't ever foresee this business just being something I'm totally hands off with. Just that's not my personality type. But what I would love to do is essentially over the next year, or let's call it 1 to 3 years, move out of all the tasks that I just don't enjoy doing, and then really focus on the things that I love about the business.
That makes sense.
And
yeah.
so for me, if I could move myself into that role, like, man, I don't know why I would sell the business or want to leave the business, because I'm enjoying what I'm doing.
Two questions there. One, what part of the business do you love?
Yeah.
Let's start there.
Okay. So I like originating tougher loans.
Okay.
And so we did a commercial deal here recently here in the Houston area as a warehouse, and getting our head around the valuation, there was an appraisal, but there was a lot of hair on it. And so getting my head around the evaluation. So I like actually going out. So I went and drove out to the
that's
the
great. That's hands-on, yeah.
And met the guy, walked through his books together, met the tenants, talked with them, and I really enjoyed that. Just like boots on the ground and looking at the potential projects.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, that's great.
And it was definitely a bit out there. It was a little bit of a higher funding amount, number one.
Sure.
Commercial, which is always a little bit tougher to underwrite. But I really loved that piece of it. And then the second piece that I really enjoy doing is actually meeting and talking with investors, potential investors. So by that I mean the third-party capital investors. So raising funds, in other words. It can be really demoralizing because sometimes you sit down with 10 people and you just completely strike out.
Yep.
But
been there.
I know. But I used to go into these meetings thinking, if I don't get this person to contribute capital, it was a failure.
Right.
And I've totally
it's an ego blow. It's like,
it can be,
I'm not
certainly
good enough for people to write a check. Like, but it's not. That's not the reality, right? Like, at the end of the day, people have
And they got stuff going on in their lives.
their own objective for their capital and things like that. And so it's like,
That's right.
and sometimes they have better opportunities, let's be honest,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like just like stocks, there's a good stock, bad stock, like you just never know, right?
Well, and it's tough because for the longest time we were raising capital within our own network. And when I sit down across the table with somebody who either I've worked with at the engineering job for 10 years, or they know me outside of it, they know me through church or through my daughter's school, there's a reputational foundation that I'm standing on top of already.
Right.
And so all I have to do at that lunch meeting is essentially introduce them to the business, which a lot of people haven't heard of hard money lending.
Right, yeah.
So I've got to introduce them to the business and then, show them that, hey, I'm a good operator and this is a low risk venture.
Right.
However, when you're sitting down across the table from somebody who you've never met, not only need to explain the business and have them understand why it's a low risk structure, et cetera, but you also have to say, hey, my name is David Little and this is why I'm a good steward of your money and I'm a legitimate person, and it's way more difficult.
That is, absolutely. And it's big responsibility, right?
Oh, it's a huge, being a fiduciary for people's capital is a huge responsibility.
Right. And I know neither of us take it lightly. It's one, our personal reputation's on the line, not to mention their money. And of course it's an investment, of course risk, there's still always risk, right? Although we try our best to mitigate and safeguard, but things happen. Like, our funds had foreclosures, right? And it sucks. And you guys have a great track record so far and have not. But at scale, it's inevitable. You will have one,
absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
One thing that we've learned is just, one, we over communicate as best we can and say, hey, this is happening, or this is a challenge that we're facing, or these are the reasons, this is what we missed in our underwriting, and our underwriting is never going to be perfect, nor like any large bank, right? Like, it's a very similar ratios, but we kind of keep it low.
Yeah.
But how are we going to circumvent it, right? Like, what are we going to do about it, right? And, the reality is, you guys haven't had one yet.
We had our first one.
Oh, did you? Congratulations. All kinds of milestones.
Yeah, I know. So after we've been in operation for 7 years. We had our first formal foreclosure, August 6th of this
okay, yeah. Year. We for us, and I'll tell kind of our story, and you're more than welcome to share if you'd like, but like it was, that perfect storm when the market changed, right? We put out money with, just like everybody else was doing deals with old comps, low interest rates, and that like perfect storm of like that window where it was like 60 days where boom, everything just changed, right? And so unfortunately, we'd put out the capital, these projects had started like right in that window. And so unfortunately, by the time they were done, rates had completely gone up, the whole market had completely changed, and slowly but surely we started getting some bad comps start to show up on the market. So they don't have a way out of it, right? And so sadly, you'll have people that just hand back keys or just say, hey, I can't finish this, or whatever the case may be, right? So that happens, it's part of the game. We do our best to mitigate it, but sometimes it's just this perfect storm of problems, right? What I was gonna say is that fortunately for us, we were able to take back an asset that was in reasonably good shape. What we did is we went ahead and just finished it because we've got flipping background, right? And said, all right, we'll just roll up our sleeves and get this thing done and put them on the market, right? And so, whenever they liquidate, we just got on the market with ours. We'll be probably at minimal break even though a lot of time was lost, right? Which is also precious, but it is what it is. That's the accountability we have to our investors, right? We're going to see it through one way or another. Oftentimes, you can kind of liquidate that to an investor if you can just get made whole again. So, lessons we are learning quickly.
Yes. And oftentimes they're really lessons in inconvenience and time, because like you said, from a financial perspective, like we had our first foreclosure, no investor lost any money,
right?
Anything like that. But I told my business partner when it was all said and done, I was like, man, that was just really inconvenient. We had to go, because our core competency in what we do is we do hard money lending.
Right.
We don't flip houses.
Yeah.
So we had to go out and source the contractors, which we had a good network. We had to go put the utilities in our name. We had to go get the real estate, stage it, do all the things.
Right.
And it was like, this is just taking away from my core business,
right.
My core focus.
That's right.
And so it was a good learning opportunity because you've never done it and you go through it all. But that's why our max loan to value is 70%.
Right.
What is your guys' underwriting?
75, yeah. Yeah, we'll stretch to 75 on repeat customers, right? Like people that have a track record with us.
And so the beautiful thing about that is like, well, you could be off 30% in the market and still be fine, right? There's going to be fees associated with that as well. But that's why ultimately when we took it back, we weren't overly concerned about the numbers. We had lent out a pretty conservative value versus what it was worth. But yeah, it was very inconvenient. But it was a good learning opportunity.
Yeah, but being a systems processes guy, you'll look backwards and say, how do I make that more convenient and make it easier and a better system around it, right?
Absolutely.
Let's kind of just round us out. This has been a great conversation. How do people keep in touch with you? How many people learn about your fund, right? I'm assuming you're always going to be capital raising, right?
So our fund is, just to give myself a 2-minute pitch.
Please.
So we're raising now in a 506c fund. We're offering third-party capital investors 9 to 10% returns.
Nice.
Our fund is a little bit unique because we did this because the vast majority of the people that comprise our fund are family and friends. Right? Jeremy and myself, in fact, are one of the largest fund holders within our fund as well. So the way we actually structured it is that the top line revenue comes in to the fund, and then the investors get paid first.
Okay.
And then it's only when the investors get paid first and fully that the business is able to make any money. So there are scenarios at which Jeremy and myself will not take a paycheck or an owner distribution because we're a little bit low cash-wise.
Got it.
And so we haven't actually had to do this, but if there was ever a shortfall in the business, as an example, if a foreclosure went wrong or we lost $20,000, $30,000 on this or that, we would absorb that hit.
That's great. It's very, very fair.
So we did that, and like I said, I mean, we did that because it's like my mom and his dad, like, this is a family and friends. So we wanted to set it up in such a way that it was very advantageous for people to want to come in, deploy capital, because we as hard money lenders, we're operators, but we're also fiduciaries.
Right.
And if you fail at the fiduciary side, like, you're not going to have any more operations to do. So that is just key. It's just such a key component for us.
That's great.
But yeah, as far as finding me, you can email me at david@crowncapitalresources.com.
I'll throw that in the show notes, obviously.
And our website is crowncapitalresources.com.
And the flip side of it, for borrowers that are looking for capital, I mean, you guys are a great lender.
Yeah.
Let's talk about kind of y'all's, lending box, asset classes you guys are comfortable with, and, geography that you guys are, looking to lend in.
So we only lend in Texas.
Okay.
And for residential, we lend up to 70% loan to value.
Okay.
We do, for new borrowers, we do as little as 10% down.
Okay.
With us, we don't do formal BPOs or surveys. We're a small company, so we can move pretty quick and underwrite relatively fast. Typically close within 48 hours of title being cleared.
Nice. That's fast.
And commercial's a little bit different. Commercial is a 50% loan to value.
Okay.
So
just keep it a little bit.
We like to have an appraisal.
Right.
Take a look at it.
Yeah, it's a whole different ball game when it comes to commercial.
It's a small part of our loan book, but it's interesting. We've been coming across more commercial deals lately, so we're getting more and more open to it.
Very good. Well, David, I appreciate your time. We're going to have all the kind of access points for everybody to get in touch with you in the show notes. I appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah.
Love your journey.
Thank you.
Look forward to doing an update down the road. We'll check back in a couple of years, see where we're at.
I love it.
All right, appreciate it, brother.